On the broadcast tonight, VAT slashed, but still on its way.
Web shop legislation also discussed in the lower chamber.
And now the juniors get their turn on the track. The Bahamas Tonight, the national report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
With the current interest on outstanding government debt pegged at $259 million, Prime Minister Perry Christie says his government is more than committed than ever to reducing the national debt. Good evening and welcome to the Bahamas Tonight. I'm Andrew Knowles.
And I'm Altaviz Munnings. Thanks for tuning in this Wednesday. While presenting the budget communication in the House of Assembly today, Prime Minister Christie said although real growth in the economy is down, he remains optimistic about better days ahead. Carla Palmer has tonight's top story.
In delivering the government's 2014-2015 budget communication, Prime Minister the Right Honourable Perry Christie says the government plans to stay the course with its 4-point fiscal recovery plan, which includes growing the economy, restraining expenditure, enhancing revenue yield and creating new investments.
In particular, we are continuing our push to develop new and expanding private sector investment projects across the breadth of the nation.
Admittedly, real growth in the economy is down significantly to 0.7% from 2.7% over last year. Tourist expenditure also declined, with stopover visitors falling by some 4% from 1.42 million to 1.36 million. According to Prime Minister Christie, softness in tourism activity last year is a key factor for this performance. But according to the International Monetary Fund, this is all subject to change.
The growth is expected to pick up over the medium term, reaching 2.8% in both 2015 and 2016, following real growth on the order of 2.3% in 2014. Mr. Speaker, tourism is expected to be boosted.
On the domestic labor front, over the course of last year, Prime Minister Christie says developments were more positive, with the national rate of unemployment falling from 16.2% in May to 15.4% in November, and he anticipates the economy improving.
We now expect an outturn for recurrent revenues in the area of $1,465 million, some 2.5% less than was budgeted, but an improvement of 6.2% over what we collected in financial year 2012-2013.
Prime Minister Christie is also optimistic of the gross financial services deficit improving as well.
We are now looking at a GFS deficit on the order of $462 million, or 5.4% of GDP in the 2013-2014 fiscal year. That compares to the budget estimate of $443 million, or 5.1% of GDP. This represents an improvement over the GF deficit of 6.3% of GDP recorded in 2012-2013.
Prime Minister Christie maintains that the government is working on a number of fronts to bolster the economy. I'm Carla Palmer for ZNS Network News. Well, the government pushes the implementation of value-added tax back some 8 months and is proposing a rate much lower than previously proposed. It was a welcome bit of news during the 2014 budget communication delivered by the Prime Minister as he laid the foundation ahead of debate on the 2014-2015 budget. We get more tonight from Shanique Miller.
Business owners and ordinary citizens breathing a little easier this evening. Confirmation that the government plans to delay the implementation of value-added tax welcomed, and the much talked about 15%, a thing of the past.
There will be one single VAT rate across the board, other than zero rate for exports. One single VAT rate across the board. That is being substantially, Mr. Speaker, reduced to 7.5% from the originally proposed 15%.
What's also good news, the July 1st implementation pushed back to January 1st, 2015. Prime Minister Christie says work to prepare everyone, including the business community and the necessary government agencies, must first take place. A task force with a budget of $150,000 has been appointed to make the message of VAT one that all can understand.
With the private sector task force engaged, the focus on consumer education will be intensifying with a process that is as transparent as possible. The VAT unit of the Ministry of Finance has prepared a number of brochures to educate the consumer. This process will continue to evolve around presentation to various civic and community groups, including churches, schools, and Rotary and Kiwanis Club. As part of the communication strategy for VAT, arrangements have also been made for nightly public service announcements on the local TV stations, as well as for production of lengthier infomercials that would target the business community. With the task force engaged, educational workshops will form the basis of stepped-up engagement with the business community. This is a prelude to the process of registering businesses for VAT and to conducting one-on-one advisory visits with firms. The strategy is two-pronged. First, accountants, attorneys, and professional advisors will be invited to attend an intensive VAT training program put on by the VAT unit in the Ministry of Finance. They would then be equipped to impart this knowledge to their clients. Businesses that prefer to deal directly with the VAT unit will then be allowed to participate in a second round of workshops, which will also begin shortly.
If there is one group that's not as happy, it would be the Bahamas Hotel and Tourism Association, who proposed that the government introduces VAT at a rate of 6%.
My government is fully sensitive to the very important role that tourism as our premier sector plays in our economy, in generating activity and in generating jobs. We are sympathetic to the difficult challenges that the sector faces in a highly competitive environment, and we will continue to monitor developments to maintain the fundamental viability of this key industry. However, the fiscal challenges that we face are as such that on the basis of the balance of evidence and advice that we have garnered from all of the studies and from the experts, we are unable to accommodate the Bahamas Hotel Association recommendation.
Leaning heavily on the model adopted by New Zealand, the United States, and the United Kingdom, Christie feels confident that the government can now put in place a policy framework for VAT. He says a VAT bill will be brought to Parliament soon. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Finance is working to meet the new deadline, January 1st. A new list detailing new exemptions will be released by the Ministry of Finance very soon. Shanique Miller, ZNS Network News.
While the opposition is welcoming the lower rate and implementation date extension, opposition MP Peter Turnquest fears that this could lead to double taxation for Bahamians if custom duties are not reduced.
That means that there's going to be a period of double taxation between January and July of 2015. Again, that is very, very significant for us to bear in mind and to consider, because the cost of living during that period is going to increase dramatically.
Debate on the long-awaited gaming legislation, which includes the regularization of web shops, will begin shortly after the budget debate is completed. It's good news for casino operators who for months have been asking the government to pass legislation allowing them to engage in online gaming. Web shop operators will also be watching this debate as their operations will be impacted as well. And Prime Minister Christie is hoping parliamentarians will support the comprehensive amendments to the gaming bill given the economic realities.
It is expected that these comprehensive and necessary reforms will result in considerable benefits to the public purse and the Bahamian economy. The creation of many new jobs, a controlled number of web shop gaming operations, as is the case with casino operations, and upholding of laws and international obligations in accordance with best practice.
It's been 3 months since Gaming Minister Obi Wilshcombe dropped the bombshell in Parliament that government was moving ahead to tax and regulate the numbers industry before the beginning of the new fiscal year. This, despite the results of the gaming poll where the majority of Bahamians who participated voted against the regulation of the industry. And since that time, there's been some concerns expressed as to whether the legal framework would be ready in time. Despite this, Prime Minister Christie says his government will press forward with its announced date.
I want to be clear on this matter to the effect that the regulatory and taxation regime that will be introduced for the web shops will feature very stringent and demanding standards in terms of levels of controls and accountability. To that end, the government has engaged international experts who will advise on appropriate policy and legal frameworks for the sector. I also wish to advise that the taxation of the web shops will be retroactive, Mr. Speaker, to July 1st, 2014.
The Bahamas Telecommunications Company could soon have a new competitor as government has appointed a task force that will adjudicate the selection of a second mobile service provider. This as BTC has held a decades-long monopoly on cellular service. Prime Minister Perry Christie told parliamentarians that government's hands were tied in getting the ball rolling on liberalizing the market because of its agreement between Cable and Wireless negotiated under the former administration. In fact, he said the agreement made it illegal for government to even begin entertaining bids for a second mobile service provider until after the April 6, 2014 deadline of BTC's monopoly. Well, it was shortly after that deadline was up, the Prime Minister confirmed government moved swiftly to mobilize the task force to prepare for the award of a second cellular license in the shortest time possible.
The task force's most immediate mandate is to formulate the competitive selection process that would be used by government to select the second cellular provider. Already significant headway has been made in this regard. In the last few weeks, the task force has been consulting with the sector regulator, IRCA, towards finalizing a request for proposal document. The request for proposal will contain the methodology and the criteria to be adopted by government for selecting the second mobile provider. When the request for proposal is finalized, the government will publish a notice inviting interested parties to register in order to participate in the process.
Well, the Prime Minister also pointed out that the selection process will comprise 2 phases and will be extensive. In fact, Phase 1 will involve an evaluation of proposals and will be based on a predetermined criteria to identify the best possible candidates. And in addition to technical and financial capabilities, Mr. Christie said government will also consider the extent to which applicants offer opportunities to the widest base of Bahamians to participate in the ownership of a new license.
We anticipate that once an invitation notice is published by government, the entire selection process is expected to take up to 6 months. And I'm saying up to 6 months because it could be less. I would love it to be less. The new provider should be able to launch services within an additional 6 months with a view to achieving maximum coverage throughout the Bahamas in the shortest possible time frame. Further details on specific rollout time frames will be provided once the new provider is selected.
Now to news on Grand Bahama. The government has finally finalized a deal for a new casino operator for that island. Minister of Tourism Obi Wilshcombe told ZNS News after the budget communication, and he anticipates that the operators will be just what Grand Bahama needs to improve its tourism product.
Has many casinos throughout the Mexico and other parts of the world. They're coming into Grand Bahama, and we're very pleased with the work that we've seen. They've been recommended to me by our consultants and also by the gaming board, and so now we're going to confirm them. They're going through all the paperwork now, and we should have that concluded within another week or so. Once that concluded, we'll give you all the details and the announcements and everything else. But we're very pleased that they're going to bring a new and exciting look to the casino, some new employment to the casino, and we're going to finally get some activity that we need.
While he did not release the name of the group as yet, Minister Wilshcombe offered these details.
The Damon Group did put the bid in. The question came down to financing. And it was not recommended at this time. but at all times we want to encourage Bahamians. In fact, we have 2 other type casinos being offered, which is very interesting. 2 Bahamians have applied for bingo halls, one here in the capital, another in Grand Bahama. Bahamians, we're looking at those. And we're also looking at an online raffle that's being projected as well. So a number of things are out there.
Following the budget communication brought by Minister of Finance, Prime Minister Right Honorable Perry Christie, several government ministers held a press conference of their own in the majority room at the House of Assembly.
It was there that Minister of State for Finance, the Honorable Michael Halkitis, revealed just how much the government plans to borrow during this fiscal term, noting that it is less than previous years.
In terms of the state of the public finances, we should all be encouraged by the revelation that the government's fiscal consolidation plan remains on course. And while we do have a resolution before the House to borrow $343 million this fiscal year, that compares to a similar resolution to borrow $465 million last year and $512 million the year before that. Again, moving in the right direction, reducing the borrowing needs year over year. Our ultimate objective is a budget that is at minimum at a balanced position and ideally, eventually, a budget showing a surplus.
Well, the Opposition Free National Movement describes the current administration as one that taxes and spends. During a press conference, opposition parliamentarians outlined a number of concerns they had with the communication, including crime, unemployment, education, national health insurance, and public sector reform. Simply put, the opposition claims there's nothing new, and once again it shows more talk, little action on the part of the government. Here's the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, Peter Turnquest.
The economy is still sluggish. GDP growth is lower than expected at 0.7% versus a 2.5% projected in the 2013-2014 budget. A dismal failure on the part of this government or a willful deceit of the Bahamian people and external agencies. Government must step up in its job creation initiatives if it is to meet its goals to our people.
Still to come, find out if there's enough airlift to support Bahamar.
And the World Relays are over, but now the future hits the track. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This news is brought to you by Shell Quality Fuels.